I knew something was coming when she topped off her wine for the third time. Her voice always got a little higher, a little more performative, when she was warming up an audience. We were at a long table near the window at Marionette, the kind of place where the lighting's dim enough to flatter anyone with a conscience. Her friends surrounded us, work friends, yoga friends, those two interchangeable brunettes from her book club who always looked like they were grading each other's laughs. I kept quiet, chewing through a steak I didn't order. I'd let her pick for me again. A gesture that used to feel affectionate but lately just felt efficient. It started with someone asking about a conference I'd just returned from. She turned to me with an exaggerated smile, already amused before I'd said a word. "Oh, he was very brave," she said, patting my arm. "Navigated all those PowerPoints like a champ." Laughter rippled around the table. I forced a smile, slow and small. That kind of comment I could let slide. But then she said it, just loud enough to cut through the clatter of cutlery and conversation. Her fork hovered, her voice bright and cruel in its timing. "He tries so hard to act confident. It's kind of adorable, like a golden retriever." I felt it land, not just in my chest, in the air. Laughter again, louder this time. But not from everyone. Emily didn't laugh. She was sitting diagonally across from me, fingers wrapped tightly around her glass, mouth a thin line. Her eyes flicked to me, just for a second. A glance so quick I might have missed it if I wasn't already watching her. I looked back at my plate and let the silence settle around me. They moved on quickly. Someone changed the subject to Pilates or some influencer who'd been cancelled. My wife turned her attention back to the conversation like nothing happened. Like I hadn't just been stripped down and left as a punchline in front of people I barely knew. I laughed too. Not out loud, but in my head, at the precision of it. Her cruelty wasn't clumsy. It was rehearsed, and Emily noticed. That was new. I didn't say anything as dessert menus arrived. I didn't need to. The damage had already been done, but not just to me. Something cracked in the room when Emily didn't join the laughter, and I felt it. Something was shifting, and for once, it wasn't under her control. On the surface, dinner wrapped the way it always did. Polished smiles, hand gestures exaggerated just enough to signal camaraderie. My wife leaned in, whispering something into one of her friend's ears that triggered a burst of giggles. The same kind of private amusement they'd been trading all night, always at someone's expense. Lately, often mine. She caught my eye across the table, gave me that sideways smile. The one that was meant to look affectionate, but never quite reached her eyes anymore. I nodded, not smiling back. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and decided not to care. I shifted my attention to the others instead. The two brunettes were still dissecting their mocktails. The guy on the end, Darren, I think, had checked out hours ago, probably regretting agreeing to this circus. But Emily, she was quiet. Not stiff, exactly. Just disconnected. Like she wasn't part of the machine anymore. At one point, she stood to adjust her coat, and I saw it again, that glance. Fleeting, almost involuntary. But this time it lingered a beat longer. My wife noticed her too, though she didn't say anything. Just followed her movement with her eyes, then reached for her wine. On the drive home, she was glowing, basking in the aftermath of another successful performance. "They really love you," she said, stretching in her seat. "You were so charming tonight." It was said lightly, like a compliment. But I heard the edge under it. The unspoken, "You behaved. You played your part." I just nodded, fingers tapping the steering wheel. A rhythm without meaning, just motion. She didn't ask why I was quiet. She didn't need to. She liked it when I was silent after she'd had her fun. Easier to frame it later as me being moody or sensitive. That night, lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling while she drifted into sleep. Her breathing slowed. Her arms slumped across my chest, not affection, just habit. Like draping a jacket over a chair. My mind went back to every other dinner, every party. The harmless jokes about my cooking, my nerdy obsessions, how I overthink everything. All delivered with a laugh and a quick, "I'm joking, babe. Relax," and I had, for too long. I'd mistaken silence for strength, endurance for love. But tonight was different. Because for the first time, someone else had seen it too. Emily had noticed, and she hadn't laughed. That changed everything. I didn't sleep much. Her arm stayed draped across me until just before sunrise, when she rolled away and curled into herself like nothing had happened. Like her words didn't leave bruises. I lay there staring at the slow glow seeping through the curtains, counting back through every moment I'd let pass without protest. The first time she joked about my income, we were at a dinner party with some of her coworkers. "He's got passion projects," she'd said, her tone playful but piercing. Translation: his startup doesn't make money yet. Everyone laughed. I had smiled too, embarrassed but not angry. I told myself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. Later, it was about my fitness. "He jogs like he's trying to escape his own thoughts." Or my emotional memory. "You should have seen him after we watched Eternal Sunshine. He was wrecked for days." Sensitive soul, this one. Always small. Always with deniability. Always in public. But this wasn't affection. This wasn't banter. It was staging. And I was the backdrop she needed to shine. The safe one. The loyal one. The one who'd sit quietly while she shaped the narrative. Lately, that confidence of hers had grown sharper. Not in private, where things were colder, more transactional, but in public, where every gesture seemed rehearsed for an invisible audience. Even affection had started to feel like theater. A kiss for the camera. A laugh timed just right. She'd become someone I didn't quite recognize, and I realized the scariest part wasn't that she changed. It was that she finally felt free to be who she really was. What unsettled me most wasn't her, it was me. How long I'd tolerated it. How easily I'd explained it away. How often I'd confused love with familiarity, safety with surrender. But last night shifted something. Emily's silence at the table, her refusal to join in, cracked the surface. It wasn't sympathy that passed between us. It was recognition. She'd seen through it. Seen her. And if she'd noticed, how long had she been watching? That question stayed with me all morning. Even as my wife buzzed around the kitchen making coffee, humming tunelessly like she hadn't spent the evening turning me into a group joke, I said nothing. Let her fill the silence with casual conversation and plans for the weekend. I watched her, the ease, the confidence, the rehearsed rhythm of someone who believed she'd already won. That she could rewrite whatever story she wanted and I'd keep reading along. She didn't notice I was studying her. That I was starting to see the pattern not just as coincidence, but strategy. And strategies could be countered. The next evening, I got the text from Emily. Just one word. Valet. I was already walking out of the office when it came through. She didn't need to explain. I knew what she meant. Our dinner group had become a ritual, monthly, predictable, and apparently she timed her moment with precision. I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes before the others. Parked 2 blocks down, walked up slowly. I stood just outside the awning, where the valet attendants moved with rehearsed urgency, and waited. They arrived in a small wave, first my wife with her signature entrance, laughing at something no one else seemed to hear, then the cluster of friends trailing behind. Emily was in the middle. She didn't look at me right away. Inside, the table filled. I kept things simple. Casual. A quiet hello, the usual nods. My wife kissed me on the cheek and said, "Look who decided to show up on time." It was framed like a compliment. It wasn't. I watched Emily during appetizers. She stayed quiet, didn't reach for the shared plates, didn't lean into the conversations. Her eyes kept drifting, not to me, but toward the door, watching the exits, measuring the room. When dessert menus arrived and my wife excused herself for the restroom, Darren following her with an awkward, "I'll check on the waiter." Emily moved. She stood, grabbed her jacket, and made her way around the table with an effortless sort of detachment. She stopped beside me, leaned in just slightly. "You good?" Her voice was low. No one else heard it. I nodded slowly, unsure what she was seeing in my face. She stepped back, eyes searching mine. "She's different when you're not around." I blinked once. The noise of the table dimmed. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant, but she didn't wait. "Let's talk. Outside." And just like that, she turned and walked toward the door. For a moment I sat still, aware of how absurd the moment must have looked to anyone watching, if they were watching. Then I stood, followed her through the crowd, out into the cool night. I half expected my wife to catch us mid-exit, maybe call after me. But she didn't see. Or if she did, she chose not to react. Outside, the air was crisp, the sidewalk busy enough to feel anonymous. Emily stood beside a planter near the curb, her arms crossed. "You don't know me well," she said without turning. "But I've known her a long time." I stayed quiet. She looked at me then, eyes steady. No pity, just clarity. "She talks like you're beneath her. Like your loyalty is something to be mocked." The words didn't hurt as much as they should have. They fit too well. Like a puzzle I hadn't wanted to finish. Then she said it. And it's not just words. There's someone else. At her gym. Maybe more. I didn't flinch. I just asked, "Why tell me?" She hesitated. "Because I've watched her do this before. But you don't deserve it." The lights from a passing car swept across us, then faded. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of being seen. Emily didn't speak like someone trying to start drama. She spoke like someone tired of watching a story repeat itself. Her words had an edge, but they weren't sharp for attention, they were clean. Surgical. "She's been calling it a phase," Emily said, her arms still folded tightly. "The gym guy was just the start. There's another, a newer one. Some friend you've never met. You were mentioned by name, but not with respect." I stood there, breath shallow, fighting back the instinct to react, to demand details, to argue, to spin. But instinct had failed me long enough. I stayed still. She watched me carefully, maybe waiting for me to crumble. I didn't. "She laughs about how you never suspect," she continued. "Like it's proof you're too trusting. Or too scared to ask questions." My jaw tightened, not out of anger, not yet, but something deeper. The realization that the emotional erosion hadn't just been collateral. It had been orchestrated, framed for sport. "She said you're like a loyal pet," Emily added, quieter now. "Said you learn your place eventually." That was in a group thread. I didn't laugh. I looked at her, meeting her eyes directly. "Why now?" Emily's gaze didn't shift. "Because watching someone get reduced in public and stay polite, it does something to a person. I didn't come here tonight planning to say anything. But after that comment, the golden retriever line? That was the last straw." I exhaled through my nose, slow and steady. The weight of it all didn't feel like a collapse. It felt like release, like gravity adjusting. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone. No flourish, no ceremony, just tapped a few times and held it out. Screenshots, messages, the private thread. Her name was in bold at the top, my wife, followed by the snide lines, the rehearsed cruelty. Mentions of controlling how things looked, of keeping me under quiet pressure. Laughter emojis. The same people from dinner. I didn't scroll. Didn't need to. "I can send them," Emily said. "If you want. Or not." I looked at the phone one last time, then met her eyes. "Yeah. Send them." She nodded, slid her phone back into her bag. She didn't ask what I was going to do. She didn't try to tell me how to feel. I offered a quiet, "Thank you." And then I turned and walked away, not toward the restaurant, not toward the valet, but straight down the sidewalk toward my car parked 2 blocks away. No goodbye. No performance. No confrontation. Just a clean exit. When I got home, she wasn't back yet. I moved quietly. 1 bag. Essentials. Laptop. A few documents. Left the rest. I paused before leaving one thing on the kitchen counter. A short note, handwritten, nothing dramatic. "I won't be your punchline anymore." Then I walked out the door, and didn't look back. The drive wasn't long, but I let it stretch. Back roads. A gas station I didn't need. Quiet music at just above a whisper. I wasn't running, I was shedding. Every mile put distance between me and that curated version of my life she'd sculpted. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt awake. Emily's message came through just after midnight. Screenshots, all neatly packaged. I didn't open them right away. Just seeing her name pop up was enough. She didn't follow it with a lecture or questions, just the files and one sentence. "Whatever you decide to do, I support it." I sat in my parked car outside a quiet rental off the highway. Just a space where no one asked questions. I didn't need much, just time, space, and silence. Inside, the room smelled faintly of old soap and disinfectant. The kind of anonymity I'd once feared but now found comforting. I stared at the ceiling fan above the bed, then finally opened the screenshots. They were worse than I expected. Not just jokes. Strategy. She'd been workshopping ways to make me seem unstable to her friends. Messages like, "If I ever need to explain why I leave, I'll just say he got clingy again." Another read, "I'm laying the groundwork now, just in case." And then the worst, a picture of me from a dinner 3 months ago, taken mid-sentence without my knowledge, captioned with, "Got him exactly where I wanted." That's when I stopped scrolling. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the joy behind them. The delight in the idea of orchestrating my humiliation with such precision. She hadn't just undermined me in private, she'd made a show of it. shared it, framed it, sold it as a brand of superiority. And still, I didn't rage. I just sat there with the quiet certainty that there was no going back. The next morning, I made 3 calls. One to a lawyer I trusted through a mutual friend. One to my employer's HR to initiate changes to my emergency contact and benefits. And one to a financial advisor I hadn't spoken to in months, asking about account protections and emergency restructures. Each call was short, controlled, no dramatic retellings, just facts, calmly delivered. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was reclaiming clarity. By noon, I'd created a digital file with every screenshot, cataloged and timestamped. I didn't know when I'd use it, or if I would, but I needed it preserved. Not for court, for truth. That evening, she texted again, then called, then again. First, "Where are you?" Then, "This is ridiculous," followed by, "Are you seriously giving me the silent treatment?" I didn't respond. I owed her nothing now. She came home to silence. I watched the home camera feed as she walked through the front door, paused, and saw the empty closet, the note on the table. Her expression didn't break immediately, it shifted slowly. A controlled descent from confusion to fury to something quieter, maybe fear. I didn't watch long. The silence she'd crafted for me had finally reversed. Now it was hers. I didn't disappear completely. Just enough to make her feel the absence. No calls, no messages, no digital trail that gave her control. I knew she checked the accounts. The ones we shared were untouched, intentionally. I wasn't petty. I was calculating. She started calling friends within the first 24 hours. I didn't hear the conversations, but I could imagine the tone. Confused concern sliding quickly into frustration, then into rehearsed victimhood. The text shifted in tone by the second day, from indignation to charm. "Let's just talk, please." Then came the apology. Not real, not direct, just a thin olive branch wrapped in self-preservation. "If something I said came off wrong, I'm sorry. You know I just joked too much." She didn't ask where I was, just when I'd be back. That was the tell. It wasn't about me. It was about restoring the narrative. Meanwhile, Emily kept her distance. No follow-up messages. No checking in. She'd handed me the truth and stepped back, exactly the way someone does when their conscience is clear. I respected that more than she probably knew. By the end of the week, the story had started unraveling on her end. One of the group thread members, someone I barely remembered from those dinner circles, forwarded the screenshot to someone else. And like these things always do, it leaked. Not publicly, but just enough. A mutual friend, Carla, sent me a message out of nowhere. "Hey, I saw something. Didn't know if you knew already. If you need to talk, I'm here." I didn't reply. I didn't need sympathy. I needed separation. Then, quietly, Emily messaged me again. "They know." No elaboration. No smugness. Just those 2 words. Like a door quietly closing. I didn't respond. But I felt something settle. Not relief, something heavier. Finality. That weekend, her gym guy, the one Emily mentioned, vanished from her social feeds. Unfollowed. No tags. No playful stories. I didn't need confirmation. The pattern was familiar. Once exposure came, she cut ties to avoid fallout. But this time, the story wouldn't obey her edits. One of the most telling signs was the silence from her circle. The ones who always replied first to her messages suddenly didn't. The likes disappeared. The social smile machine went quiet. And then the final leak. Someone, maybe Carla, shared the group chat screenshot where she called me a project, and joked about shaping me to her liking. It got passed around. Subtly, yes, but in the social circles we moved through, subtle was enough. Her curated persona, clever, witty, in control, fractured. I could see it in the growing gap between her online performance and the lack of engagement. The audience wasn't clapping anymore. She tried to pivot, shift tones, share inspirational quotes about growth and self-awareness. But it landed hollow. Because behind the hashtags, everyone knew. I didn't post anything. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. The truth had finally developed a voice of its own. By Monday, the narrative had broken free from her hands. She still tried to steer it, of course. A few subtle messages on her stories about people being cruel, and how loyalty gets mistaken for weakness. But it rang hollow. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a lie exposed, not outrage, just absence. Her audience wasn't pushing back. They were pulling away. Emily sent one more message. This time it came through without ceremony, just a screenshot. Group chat. The same thread. A message from one of the brunettes, Amanda, I think, stating, "We're not part of this anymore. You went too far." Then another from Darren. "You made him a joke. Why?" No one defended her. No one laughed. I looked at the screenshot for a long time. Not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed everything. The people who had smiled along with her had finally stopped smiling. That wasn't justice, but it was a start. Meanwhile, I was setting anchors. My lawyer moved quickly, not because I asked him to rush, but because I came prepared. Documentation, statements, screenshots, timelines, everything catalogued with surgical calm. No emotion in the paperwork, just precision. We filed separation paperwork by the end of the week. She hadn't responded to the initial notice. Probably still thought she could talk her way through it, or freeze until I thawed. She didn't understand yet. I wasn't angry. I was finished. My name was pulled from our joint accounts. My shares in a mutual investment account restructured under a new LLC. The condo we'd co-signed was already listed for appraisal, a line drawn neatly through what used to be home. She finally reached out after receiving the legal envelope. A long message this time. Half confused, half pleading. "Is this really necessary? Can we not just talk? Emily has always had issues. You know that." I didn't respond. She followed with a voice message. I didn't listen. Silence was no longer a punishment, it was policy. That night, a friend of hers who I'd barely spoken to, Rachel, reached out. "I don't want to take sides, but I'm sorry. You deserve better." I didn't reply. I wasn't building alliances. I was clearing the board. By the weekend, I'd moved into a short-term rental, a quiet corner unit with no shared walls, nothing fancy. Just peace. No performances. No tight-lipped dinners under curated lighting. No one sculpting me into a fool with a smile. Just me, my documents, and the slow process of returning to the man I was before she mistook loyalty for permission. And in the background, her world kept cracking. Not loudly. Just enough to make her realize, you don't need to shout to burn a structure down. Sometimes you just have to walk away, and let the truth echo behind you. The legal envelope didn't just shake her, it iced her. The moment it became real, the tone changed again. Gone was the confidence, the breezy dismissals. Now the messages came spaced out and cautious. "Can we talk before anything becomes permanent?" Turned into, "I just want to understand what you think you saw." That phrasing told me everything. She still believed this was about perception. She didn't grasp yet that what broke us wasn't just what she did, it was how long she thought she could keep doing it. I met my lawyer in person on a gray Tuesday morning. The office was high up, glass-walled, humming with quiet efficiency. He walked me through asset separation, spousal considerations, potential legal exposures. I kept my questions short and direct. I wasn't trying to hurt her financially, but I was protecting myself from future liabilities. Anything we'd built together was now subject to clean division. Anything she'd hidden or leveraged socially? That was out of reach now, hers to clean up. One by one, accounts were adjusted. Ownership documents rewritten. Mail rerouted. I froze the one credit card she still had access to. Not out of spite, just logistics. She texted within hours. "Why is my card declined?" I ignored it. Let the silence deliver the message. I didn't announce moves anymore. I just made them. She reached out to mutual friends, not for support, but for clarity. But clarity didn't help her anymore. People had seen the screenshots. They'd seen her language, her glee, her careful cruelty. Even those who didn't take sides stepped back. At her gym, someone let slip that he left because of her mouth. I wasn't there to hear it, but I heard about it. The trainer she'd spent so much time around? Silent now. Posts that used to tag him in passing, gone. She attempted a pivot. Started posting quotes about miscommunication and healing. A photo of a latte and a caption. "Rebuilding starts from within." But no one bought it, and I didn't watch. Instead, I turned inward. I created new routines. Morning runs, journal entries, calls with old friends who didn't ask questions, just asked how I was, and listened. I met with my financial advisor again, this time to review longer-term transitions, trust structuring, tax strategies, things she never bothered to understand but always expected to benefit from. I didn't smile during these meetings. I didn't feel victorious. Just deliberate. This wasn't vengeance. It was exit velocity. She'd created a version of me that stood still, loyal, harmless. The kind you can sculpt into punchlines at dinner parties. But that version no longer existed. And she was starting to feel it. I could tell. Because for the first time in years, she didn't know what move to make next. And I wasn't giving her a script to follow. The message she finally sent wasn't long, but it was telling. I just wish you'd said something earlier. I read it twice. That familiar shift, subtle redirection. She wasn't taking responsibility. She was distributing it, trying to reframe this as a communication breakdown, not a pattern of public mockery and broken trust, as if it had all come down to me not expressing discomfort about being publicly mocked. She still didn't understand. I didn't reply. Silence was no longer a tactic, it was freedom. That week, her social life thinned visibly. I saw it in mutual group calendars I'd forgotten I still had access to. One by one, events marked as attending disappeared. A friend's birthday dinner, cancelled. A gallery opening, uninvited. These weren't strangers. They were the same people who used to rally around her, laugh on cue, echo her lines. Now, they weren't even returning her texts. Meanwhile, my attorney informed me she'd finally retained representation. The email exchange was brief and unceremonious. Her lawyer requested a mediation meeting to clarify misunderstandings. Mine declined. There were no misunderstandings, just documentation. I didn't need a confrontation. I already had the truth. She tried a different approach next, an email this time. Longer, structured, rehearsed. She wrote that Emily never liked her, that she had vented in private, but meant nothing by it, that I'd misinterpreted jokes, taken out of context. There it was, context, her last line of defense. But the context was this: she'd built a theater where I played the predictable role, quiet, accommodating, unthreatening. The shift wasn't just social now, it was emotional. I no longer hoped for remorse. I no longer needed it. Her explanations were as brittle as her social standing. Even Emily, still silent, still distant, remained in quiet contact. No overstepping, no suggestions, just a neutral presence. A name in my inbox that reminded me not everyone had followed her script. I didn't pursue more than that. I wasn't ready to build, but I'd stopped looking backward. The last mutual friend who'd remained in touch with her finally messaged me. A short line. She's saying she never meant to lose you. That it just got out of hand. I didn't respond. The story she was telling now wasn't for me. It was for whoever was still listening. And that list was shrinking fast. It had been just over 5 months when I saw her again. It wasn't planned. A gallery opening, one I nearly skipped. But a friend had insisted, and I didn't want to keep living like I might run into a shadow at every corner. I walked in without fanfare, nodding to familiar faces, keeping my pace even. I hadn't thought of her in weeks. Not deeply. Not in the way that twisted something in my gut. And then there she was, thinner, paler, wearing an outfit that was trying too hard, sharp lines, confident colors, but nothing behind the eyes. Her posture was stiff, the kind that used to be effortless. She didn't look at me right away, but I knew the moment she noticed. Her spine straightened just slightly. Her hand stopped mid-gesture. She was standing near the wine bar with someone I didn't recognize, someone trying not to look like a placeholder. I didn't flinch, just kept walking. She took a step toward me. It was subtle, uncertain. A beat passed, her mouth opened, just barely. I turned before she could speak. Not fast, not rude, just away. The person I turned toward wasn't important. A curator, maybe? A name I didn't catch. What mattered was this: they looked at me without agenda. Spoke to me like a peer, not a prop. And when I laughed, quietly, genuinely, it wasn't to perform. It was because I meant it. Behind me, I felt the absence. The space where her voice should have tried to recover, to call my name, to perform some version of regret. But nothing came. She didn't follow. Later, I heard she left early, quietly. No scene. Just a hushed goodbye to someone at the door and a swift exit into the night. That's the thing about performers. Without an audience, the act dissolves. I stayed longer than I planned. Drank half a glass of something dry. Talked to people I'd once avoided, not out of discomfort but out of habit. Now I stood straighter. Not defensive. Just clear. She hadn't just lost me. She'd lost the scaffolding she'd built around herself, the narrative that required me to remain in place. And I had finally moved.